Hello, my name is Patrick Blevins, and today we'll be talking about development tolerance. This is for exam 3C. Developmental tolerance. Immature B cells bear a functional receptor in the form of membrane IgM, but have not yet begun to express any other class of immunoglobulin. Once the functional BCR is assembled on the B cell membrane, the receptor must be tested for its ability to bind to self antigens in order to ensure that as few as possible autoreactive B cells emerge from the bone marrow. The immature B cells that are found to bear autoreactive receptors undergo one of three fates. The three fates are first, clonal deletion, second, receptor editing, and the third one is clonal tolerance. First, we're going to talk about clonal deletion. Clonal deletion is the induced death of members of a clone of lymphocytes with inappropriate receptors. These immature B cells are lost from the repertoire prior to leaving the bone marrow by apoptotic death. The second fate that these cells could endure is receptor editing. Receptor editing is the process by which the T or B cell receptor sequence is altered after their initial recombination event in order to reduce affinity for self antigens. And then there are some cases where some autoreactive B cells that recognize soluble antigens within the bone marrow may survive to escape the bone marrow environment, but they become anergic or unresponsive to any further antigenic stimuli. The last fate we're going to talk about is clonal tolerance. Immature B cells in the bone marrow are exquisitely sensitive to tolerance induction. There have been many studies on this topic. Central tolerance is the loss of B cells bearing self-reactive receptors within the bone marrow. The development of adaptive immune system based on the random generation of antigen receptors requires a stringent selection process that will sift through receptor specificities to remove those reacting with self antigens. When dealing in the B cell lineage, this selection process is first applied to the IgM positive immature B cells. By using increasingly sophisticated mouse models, investigators have identified the central tolerance mechanisms that negatively select autoreactive immature B cells and prevent inclusion of their antigen receptors into the peripheral B cell pool. There have been some additional studies, and those studies uncovered mechanisms that promoted the differentiation of non-autoreactive immature B cells and their positive selection into the peripheral B cell population. These mechanisms of central selection are fundamental to the generation of naive B cell repertoire that is largely devoid of self reactivity while capable of reacting with any foreign insult. Sorry about that. Um, the developmental process. The developmental process of B cells is really tightly controlled. Developing B cells first express a mature BCR on the cell surface in the form of IgM, and as such are classified as immature B cells. Uh, B cell generation in the bone marrow of adult mammals occurs through a tightly controlled developmental process. Productive rearrangement of immunoglobulin heavy and light chain genes segments in B lymphocyte precursor cells, in addition to the expression of Ig alpha or CD79A and Ig beta CD79B, result in the generation and the expression on the cell surface of a mature B cell antigen receptor, or also known as BCR. Whereas the combination of IgH and L chains determines the antigenic specificity of the newly formed BCR. Their association with the Ig alpha and the Ig beta allows transduction of a signal inside the cell that directs cell fate. Developing B cells first express a mature BCR on the cell surface in the form of IgM, and as such are classified as immature B cells. It is at the immature B cell stage that the BCR is tested for the first time for reactivity against autoantigens. This test can determine whether the immature B cell and the antibody it expresses, on the surface will be selected into the peripheral B cell repertoire. Central B cell tolerance, in fact, refers to the process that negatively selects newly generated immature B cells that react with self-antigen in the bone marrow environment. This is considered the first checkpoint of B cell tolerance, and the results of this checkpoint are fundamental to the generation of naive repertoire that contain foreign reactive antibodies and is largely devoid of self-reactive specificities. Development continues. On passing several checkpoints, this central checkpoint, immature B cells continue to differentiate into transitional and mature B cells before and after they travel to the spleen. Analysis of the bone marrow in early immature B cell repertoire indicates that a staggering 50 to 75% of these cells express BCRs that are specific for self antigens both in mice and humans. Uh, sorry. There have been similar studies performed on cell populations at the other end of the central checkpoint, namely transitional and naive mature B cells in the spleen and blood, show a much lower frequency, 20 to 40%, of cells expressing autoreactive antibodies, demonstrating the stringency and limitation of this initial selection step. Moreover, individuals affected by autoimmune diseases such as lupus or rheumatoid arthritis bear many more autoreactive cells in their new immigrant and naive B cell populations, indicating a defect in central or peripheral B cell selection. It seems important that the development of autoreactive immature B cells be constrained to prevent the potential occurrence of autoimmunity. However, there are also reasons to believe that the high frequency of autoreactive specificities generated during primary Ig gene rearrangements may be necessary for generation of the peripheral B cell repertoire. Uh, a fraction of autoreactive immature B cells, the ones that are manifesting a low level of self-reactive activity, do bypass the central checkpoint of tolerance and differentiation into mature B cells. The inclusion of these weakly self-reactive B cells in the peripheral B cell repertoire may allow recognition of broader spectrum of foreign molecules, potentially decreasing the negative impact of infections, especially at the early stages. These are the references I used. I used one outside source, and I used her book as well. And Dr. Blair, I'm fine with you using this in your library or however you need to in the future. Thank you so much.